Bob Ginderman. I'm your MC for today. Thanks today will be given by President Robert Fisher, followed by the Royal Toast to be presented by President Chris. Please ensure your glass is charged. Robert.
Thank you, Bob. What is philanthropy? Well, according to Wikipedia, so it must be right, it is the desire to promote the welfare of others, expressed especially by the generous donation of money to good causes. The word philanthropy conjures up an image of ultra-wealthy individuals donating substantial portions of their wealth for the benefit of individuals and society. While it's an honourable cause, for many of us, it may seem to be beyond our reach, requiring vast reserves of wealth. Should this put us off philanthropy? Not at all. Philanthropy is increasingly considered, especially among the millennial generation, as an opportunity to give time, money, knowledge, opinions, and networking to a good cause. For most of us, this is perfectly achievable. The best example of philanthropy in a Rotary context is our own Global Foundation, which transforms our monetary gifts into service projects that change lives both close to home and around the world. Since it was founded more than 100 years ago, the Rotary Foundation has spent more than $4 billion on life-changing sustainable projects. So in addition to giving our time and resources to charity, we should always remember to support our own foundation. For good food, friendships, and the opportunity to serve others, we give thanks.
Thank you, Robert, for the reflection. Perhaps next time we also should see what ChatGPT has to say. I think it's so Rotarians and guests, a toast to Australia and Rotary International. Australia and Rotary International. Please be seated. We will be breaking for lunch and we'll reconvene around 1:10 p.m. Please enjoy the fellowship and meal. Members, visitors and guests, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our 34th meeting of this Rotary year and our 5,025th all-time club meeting in our 103rd year. It's wonderful to see you all here today. Our guest speaker is Clementine Lucas, Philanthropy Manager, Morgan Stanley Wealth Australia, and will be speaking on growing philanthropy in Australia, why a culture of giving matters. Clementine will be more fully introduced later in the program by our Chair of the Day, past President Philip Endersby. In the meantime, would you please join me in acknowledging and making them both welcome. Thank you. Visiting our club, we have Tenille Gilbert, Co-founder and Managing Director for ChangeCo. We have recently funded a For ChangeCo project and Tenille will be reporting to us on the effects and progress shortly. Also here as our guests, we have Bill and Victoria Pickett. Bill will shortly be presented and recognised by the club for his efforts for the community as a Paul Harris Fellow. Accompanying Bill are former colleagues from the Board of Communities That Care, Professor John Tumburu, Chair, Barbara Minuzu, Board Member, Director, and Jennifer Nazareth, Board Secretary. Please join me in making them welcome. Welcome. We have other visiting Rotarians, visitors and guests of members. I invite you and your host to stand when your name is announced and ask that you please remain standing to enable the club to welcome you in a collective manner. So, guests of Rotarians, supporting our guest speaker, we have a strong showing from club corporate member Morgan Stanley. In fact, I was wondering whether there was anyone else in the office, but they said, only the revenue generators. No, I'm only kidding. Welcome to Nicholas Petruni, Chad Brendish, Arjang Taylor, who have their guests, Margot Dalbus and Andrew Durakovic. Also, we have Kenza Daidi, guest of Bernie McIntosh. I'm not sure whether Antoine Maluhi Nushan Anguru is here. We also have Kostas Siorthis, a guest of mine. And very pleased to note Melissa McShane is back as a member. Melissa was a corporate member of Bonix Institute, but has returned as a member of the club. Welcome. Thanks, Melissa. We also have visiting Australian Rotarians Michael Lapina, our District Governor-elect, Aviv and Jessica Palti from the Passport Melbourne Club, and also Maria Hicks from the Passport Melbourne Club. Welcome to you all. Thank you. Moving on now to the Paul Harris presentation. The Paul Harris Fellow is named for Paul Harris, who founded Rotary with 3 business associates in Chicago in 1905 and was established in his honour in 1957 to support humanitarian and educational programs of the Rotary Foundation, funded, implemented and managed by Rotarians and Rotary clubs around the world. It is the tradition of this club that the naming of a Paul Harris Fellow is based on the contribution of individual members and deserving members of the community who practice the Rotary motto, service above self. Today we recognise the efforts of Bill Pickett as Paul Harris Fellow. Now I'll read from his citation. Bill has been a Rotarian for almost 29 years, 26 of those in our club, with previous Rotary membership with Calamba in the Philippines. Bill's classification on induction was engineering programs, being at the time General Manager Victoria for Engineering Specialists, VicPac Engineering Scientists Limited. Since joining, Bill has been active in the Welfare of the Young Committee, where he was a champion for the Committees That Care program, an early intervention and prevention framework to guide communities towards better health and behavioural outcomes for young children. Bill served as the club's Community Service Director, 1999 to 2001, a stalwart of the Canterbury Waverley Group. He is presently Group Captain. Additionally, Bill coordinates the photography team. It is Bill's involvement with Communities That Care, CTC, that we want to highlight today as our club's representative on its board, since the company was first established many years ago. Bill has recently resigned from the board, ending that unbroken representation of the club. Rotary Melbourne has been proud and supportive of the CTC model, with proven effectiveness in early intervention and prevention activities, and remains committed to social change for the benefit of young people. We commend Bill and the other board members here today on pursuing the mission to build healthy futures for young people and their families through a process of community engagement and capacity building. And know there is pride in our involvement from the start. Bill, for your outstanding commitment and efforts in representing the club in supporting Community That Care programs, thereby reducing youth injury and violence, we commend you for making a difference and have pleasure in naming you a Paul Harris Fellow. A full citation will be published in the next bulletin. Please join me in congratulating Bill, and now I call on Bill to respond and tell us about the club's work in the area. So please, actually, we'll get the citation done. All right, we'll get.
Thank you, everyone. It's a tremendous honour to gain this award. It really is going to mean a lot to me. So thank you to the club for making the award possible. I really appreciate it. Just a little bit of history. Communities That Care came out of the Welfare of the Young Committee some 25 years ago, where there was an incident involving one of the committee members, and the committee just wanted to do something about keeping kids out of trouble, and decided that they wanted to go down a path of
prevention rather than cure post-events. The government at the time said we're prepared to support a process coming out of the club. Just come back to us with a model and tell us, what we can do to help. So that led to an international search involving people from University of Melbourne and other groups. They came across this community as a care model that had been developed by the University of Washington. And where the model was different and unique is that it is an evidence-based model, which means that the actions taken are based on firm, conclusive evidence, and that the programs that are delivered also have an evidence base in terms of their effectiveness. So essentially, the model involves surveying school-aged children to measure their exposure to risks that'll lead to problem behaviour, and also their exposure to preventive factors that will help prevent them getting into trouble. And then training community collaboration groups of local leaders in understanding the outcomes of the survey and choosing appropriate programs for that community to address the issues in that community. So over the years, the group has established some very good outcomes. We've got measurable results on a statewide basis in terms of reduction in problems at the target community levels, and it's worked extremely well. So we're delighted with it. The issue of one of the ongoing issues, of course, is getting funding for prevention activities. It's not something that's top of the mind for a lot of political leaders, unfortunately, and it's always tough going. So that's the biggest ongoing challenge for communities that care. However, it still receives a lot of very strong support. And things like, when our funding was tight, the accountants that were involved agreed to provide all of their services on a voluntary basis, which was really wonderful, and that's been great. So there's been a lot of tremendous support, and hopefully that'll be ongoing, and the organisation will continue to deliver great results.
Now, let's move on to For ChangeCo. So we are delighted Tenille Gilbert, CEO for ChangeCo, accepted this invitation by past President Robert Fisher to lunch today. For ChangeCo is a social enterprise with a vision of an Australia free from youth homelessness, indeed. Last year, through the Welfare of the Young Committee, Rotary Melbourne contributed $10,000 towards a special project that was designed to test, develop and pilot catering as a viable additional service offering to complement the organisation's other work as a social enterprise. Tenille is going to tell us what the sponsorship has meant to the continuing growth of For ChangeCo. Tenille, please come forward.
There we go. Hello, everybody. It's a short bite, I believe, from a short person, so well aligned. It's lovely to be here, and thank you so much for having me and for the ongoing support of For ChangeCo. As an organisation, we exist because around 28,000 young people experience homelessness on any given night in Australia, and it's good to be amongst people who are community-minded and understand that that's absolutely not okay. And as a very small part of a bigger system working towards this challenge, we at For ChangeCo are doing our bit every day to support young people out of the cycle of homelessness and into a future of their choosing. So I'll just give you a little bit more context on For ChangeCo for those of you who might not have heard about us before I update you on what we've been up to with our catering. So as an organisation, we are just over 9 years old. We started back in around end of 2014, 2015, when myself and my co-founders were young and a bit frustrated, I guess, with what we were seeing around us and with other young people not having access to education, employment, really hope for their future. We started really simply by making some crepes in St Kilda on our crepe griddles and selling those crepes to people walking by, and then donating that funding to local organisations. We've developed a little bit since then. We now have 4 cafes. We have the crepes have become a food truck, and now thanks to Rotary Melbourne, we also have our Catering for Change as the other arm of our business. So we operate with both the trade revenue streams as well as philanthropy supporting our work. And the crux of what we do is we provide paid on-the-job training and employment to young people who are at risk of homelessness. So the young people that come into our program are in pretty difficult situations. Usually they're finding it very difficult to get into the employment market. And, you know, the truth is from when we started to now, things are probably only getting tougher for young people, and we're really seeing a huge demand for our services. So catering came about because we've been thinking for a long time about how we diversify our revenue. As a social enterprise, we're really interested in how we grow our trade revenue. That's really what we can control, and how we decrease our reliance on philanthropy so that we can have a sustainable long-term organisation that continues to be around for many years to come, because as I said, sadly at the moment, the challenge that we are addressing is not going anywhere. So for us, catering meant this opportunity to connect with businesses. It meant an opportunity to provide an extra revenue stream with a nice profit margin, and eventually to start training and employing young people in that kitchen space. So, you know, during COVID, we had some moments where we were very entrepreneurial, but we were also a little bit desperate, dare we say, and kind of just threw some different ideas together. And from that learning, we recognised that we really needed to set this next project out as something a lot stronger with a really good foundation. So the funding provided by Rotary Melbourne allowed us to actually set up our brand, set up our menu, think about partnerships, think about the logistics, which are all these things that, to be honest, in quite a resource-tight organisation, it would have been hard to find the time and space to do those things prior to that. So now we have Catering for Change, and we are running events. Well, not running events, we're taking food out to events a couple of times a week at the moment. That's grown really steadily from what was kind of, random events to start with, one event a week for a bit, and now really growing into that couple of events, which allows us that extra profit to bring back into our impact and support more young people, which is exactly what we exist to do. And as I alluded to, we also see it as a really great opportunity to expand the diversity of the training program. So we know that the young people we work with, they love making coffee. Some of them love customer service, not all of them, but a lot of them are really interested in food. That hands-on engagement is what we really see creating passion for young people and drawing the purpose out of them, which means they want to get involved in work and they start thinking about their future. I'm aware I'm probably close to time, but I'm just going to tell a really quick story. So I'm going to tell a story about a young woman who's in our program over the last year. Her name is Charlotte. She came to us from one of our housing service partners called Launch Housing. And when she came, she was really just looking for a job. Her quote really, directly to us was, "I want food in my belly and I want a roof over my head." She was very much thinking short term. She was really worried about her future. She was not having any success in getting into the employment market, was really worried about what housing looked like for her in the near future. So she came to us, head down, got to working hard and, got to a shift every day, but wasn't really connecting too much with what was going on in the space. Pretty quickly though, coffee was that tool to connect, and that's what we often find. So once she started discovering that passion for coffee, that's when things really changed for her, and she started thinking about her future and developing that idea of, hey, I could be a barista, I could work in hospitality, I can have these goals. And that's such a mindset shift that we see in our young people, which is incredible. She finished up the program late last year, and we were able to connect with Park Hyatt Hotel, set up an interview for her there, and she did the rest of showing off the skills and her awesome person. And she's about 3.5 months into that role now and loving it, and we're now having chats with Park Hyatt about our next job placement there. So these are, it's just one story of many stories that we have, but yeah, we could not do it without support of people like yourselves. So thank you so much, and really appreciate listening to me today. Thank you.
So thank you, Tenille, and we wish you and the organisation and your colleagues ongoing success, growth, and also look forward to Rotary being part of that journey as well and helping out. Just some member notices. The Weehigh visit, Walter and Eliza Hall visit, is on next Thursday, 4th of April. We have a good showing already, but if you'd like to attend, please register with Joe, and we'll pass that information on. So registration closes tomorrow. The Young Achiever and Environmental Awards. The Young Achiever Awards are closed this week as well, so if you have any other nominees or relationships that you could cajole to provide some nominees, please do so. Also calling for nominations from the schools for our Environmental Award. Members with any close relationships to secondary schools are welcome to approach on the committee's behalf, and information can be obtained from the Rotary office. Next Wednesday evening, so hence the meeting will be held at RMIT, where we will roll up our sleeves, put some gloves on and some hair nets to pack meals in the 4 meal relief food activity. So commences at 6 o'clock, ends at 7, and then optional fellowship and dinner across the road at the Oxford Scholar. So friends, family, partners are welcome. Join us and register via Humanitics. Now it's my pleasure to call on Chair of the Day, past President Phil Endersby, to take over the meeting and fully introduce our speaker. Phil.
Thank you, Chris. One of the great things about being the Chair of the Day is that you get to sit next to the Speaker, and as much as we get the sort of clipped CV, you can then ask the questions that you'd like to ask. So, Clementine, educated down in Geelong, she's married, she's got 3 kids, 2, 4 and 7. Lives down now at Mount Martha, which is the best part of Melbourne to live, beautiful down the peninsula. On the more serious side, let me say that with Morgan Stanley, Clementine joined about a month ago, but prior to that, as you can see from the notes that came out, she's had an involvement in the arts and an extensive involvement in the philanthropic area, and also with Perpetual Trustees. Perpetual Trustees is something that's well known to our club. One of our current members used to be working there up until, golly gosh, 20 years ago, Ross Scholes Robinson. So our association there is good, and obviously we're delighted to have Morgan Stanley part of us too. So without any further ado, please welcome Clementine to address us today. Australia is one of the wealthiest nations on earth, but is not one of the most generous. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to speak to the #1 Rotary Club in Australia, the first and the largest, about the importance of growing philanthropy and why a culture of giving matters. I'd first like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are meeting, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd also like to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the rich culture and continual care Aboriginal people bring to our communities. I feel very privileged to be among Melbourne Rotarians, community-minded leaders who share and strive for the ultimate goal to help build a better world locally, nationally and globally. So I therefore fear that I am perhaps preaching to the converted about the benefits of growing philanthropy and a culture of giving in Australia. Your club's guiding values of service above self, friendship, diversity and inclusion, ethics, integrity and leadership very much align with the underlying ethos of philanthropy. The term philanthropy, particularly in Australia, can often be polarising. And unlike in places like the United States, where a culture of philanthropy and a duty to give back is deeply embedded, philanthropy in Australia has at times raised suspicion and criticism. And the well-known culture of the tall poppy syndrome has unfortunately had the side effect of sometimes stifling conversations around giving. This syndrome, along with the false idea that philanthropy is associated with elitism and only applies to the ultra high net worth individuals, has, I would argue, hindered the ability for it to grow. And Australia's general reliance and expectation on government to support communities has also, I believe, stifled the growth of philanthropy in comparison to other countries. We need to move on from these notions and acknowledge and celebrate philanthropy to help the size and number of philanthropic gifts grow, which is very much needed. We also need to educate more Australians about the benefits of philanthropy, not just for them personally, but also for society. And my experience and the data shows that Australians do have the capacity and ability to give more, but often lack the guidance on how to do it effectively. We know that philanthropy underpins the crucial efforts of charities, not-for-profit organisations and community groups, which we've just heard from Tenille. And it also has the power to address complex social and environmental issues. And importantly, philanthropy contributes to a better society and can provide flexible and innovative funding, often when government cannot. The need to grow philanthropy and foster a culture of giving is therefore critical to the survival of the for-purpose sector, which provides important support and services to our communities. And as we embark on the greatest wealth transfer in history, there is enormous scope to increase giving and encourage Australians to give more meaning and purpose to their wealth through philanthropy. To best appreciate and understand philanthropy, it's helpful to first start at its origin and unpack its meaning. So the Greek playwright Aeschylus coined the term philanthropy back in the 5th century BCE, and it is derived from the Greek word philos, meaning love, and anthropos, meaning humanity. And so philanthropy in its most simple form means love of humanity. A philanthropy is essentially one who acts out of love for humankind. And it's safe to say that your association with Melbourne Rotary, an organisation that is built on the founding principle of service above self, classifies you all as philanthropists. But philanthropy in the modern era is more commonly a reference to generosity in all of its forms, and it's often defined as giving gifts of time, talent, and treasure to help build a better world for others. Philanthropy has clearly been at the heart of Rotary Melbourne since its establishment in 1921. And over the years, this club has worked collectively to give time, talent, and treasure to take action and create lasting change, of which you should all feel immensely proud. But unfortunately, your efforts and values are not mirrored by all Australians. The focus of my speech today will be on this disparity. And despite being one of the wealthiest nations on earth, Australia is not one of the most generous. Our environment for philanthropy ranks at just 19th in the world. And with giving as a percentage of GDP at 0.81%, Australia lags behind comparable nations, including New Zealand at 1.84% and 2.1% in the United States. And only 7% of Australians leave a bequest in their will, which is well below the average of other countries. But most alarmingly, of the Australians with a taxable income above $1 million, only 55% made tax-deductible donations, and this is compared to 90% of Americans. The percentage of Australians giving to charity is also falling rapidly, and despite the number and scale of Australian philanthropic foundations growing steadily, it's not at the pace required to support the for-purpose sector into the future. We're also seeing trends of mass market giving and volunteering declining, and the rise in the cost of living is having a direct and stifling impact on fundraising. It's also placing more pressure on organisations whose costs are increasing, as well as the volume of Australians they serve. I often hear from charitable organisations, such as For Change, that since the pandemic, individuals who never thought that they would need to access services are turning to charities for the first time to help support them with essentials and basic provisions. It is also well known that the pandemic contributed to a steep decline in volunteers. And whilst we're seeing an uptick in volunteer numbers, they're not at the pre-pandemic levels. Before I delve deeper into the macro trends and current developments, I'd like to briefly talk about my personal connection to giving and how I developed an interest in philanthropy. I wasn't aware of the term philanthropy at the time, but the notion of giving back was instilled in me from a very young age. And some of my various earliest memories are selling badges with my grandfather outside shopping centres in Geelong to support legacy. His father, my great-grandfather, served in the First World War and then in the Second World War, where he was killed in action. He left behind his wife and 7 children, my grandfather being the eldest. And after my great-grandfather's death, Legacy stepped in and helped support my widowed great-grandmother and her children. So for the rest of his life, my grandfather was incredibly grateful for the support his family received from Legacy. And seeing my grandfather dutifully give his time to raise funds for the organisation was inspiring and made a lasting impression on me. And I have other countless memories from my childhood of raising funds for organisations and giving my time to different causes. And my husband and I encourage our children to give back, and I think it's finally starting to sink in. I was really proud of my 7-year-old daughter when during the last summer holidays, she woke up one morning and she said, "Mum, I want to make some lemonade and I want to establish a lemonade stand in front of our house and to raise funds for a koala hospital," just off her own bat. She raised $48. And it might just be a small gesture, but I'm hopeful that she will continue to dedicate her time to causes she is passionate about in the future. But growing up, I had no idea that a career in philanthropy existed or could even be possible. In fact, it was not until I was working for the former Minister for the Arts when I met the late Betty Amsden. And she was the one who first explained the Greek origin of the term philanthropy to me. Betty was one of Victoria's most visible and vocal advocates for philanthropy. She was also one of the most extraordinary and generous people I have ever met. Her approach to philanthropy was rare. She gave not only financial support, but also gifted her time, wisdom, and energy. She had a vision of a united world, one which we are connected to others by a shared sense of our humanity. Betty loved to support individuals affecting change, no matter their professional role or level of experience. She recognised that everyone, given the opportunity, has the ability to be a change maker and contribute to shaping a better world, principles of which you all as Rotarians all share and value. Betty supported a diverse range of organisations during her lifetime, including those related to the arts, children, leadership, and health and disability. She established the Betty Amsden Foundation in 2014 to ensure that her support of people and community could continue long after she had passed. And to this day, the foundation continues to honour her extraordinary legacy. My encounters with Betty had a profound impact on me and encouraged me to pursue a career in philanthropy. In Japan, there's a concept known as ikigai, and it refers to something that gives a person a sense of purpose, a reason for living. And the concept is centered around the notion of finding what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And I had found my ikigai in philanthropy. I was drawn to how philanthropy can pioneer, provide necessary risk capital, can be responsive, and contribute to a better society. Importantly, philanthropy can provide flexible and innovative funding and can work with government to find new ways to break cycles of disadvantage and address some of the world's most complex challenges. And for the past 7 years, I have helped to advise individuals and families on how to better structure their giving and establish their own philanthropic foundations. And part of my role is to guide clients, often across multiple generations, and help them to implement effective philanthropic strategies. Developing a strategic approach to giving helps to maximise the impact in the communities donors are passionate about. And in my current role at Morgan Stanley, I'm very fortunate to work with clients to help them identify their values and interests and find organisations and causes that align with their charitable goals. Morgan Stanley has a long history of working with not-for-profits and philanthropists, both in Australia and right across the globe. I feel proud to work at a firm of which giving back is a core value, and philanthropy is very much embedded in the firm. Globally, Morgan Stanley has donated nearly $166 million of its own funds to charities over the past 12 months, and our staff have volunteered over 200,000 hours across 29 countries during our Global Volunteer Month. And whilst philanthropic advice is a relatively new profession in Australia, as you can imagine, the professionalisation of philanthropy is much more developed in the United States. And unlike Australia, the rise of philanthropy in the United States occurred much earlier and began at scale during its gilded age of the late 19th century. And prominent philanthropists such as Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller are well known for their philanthropic endeavours and helped to establish the first philanthropic foundations which still exist today. There are now over 120,000 foundations in the United States, with combined assets estimated at $1.2 trillion US. Together, these foundations donate more than $100 billion US every year to charitable purposes. In Australia, a culture of philanthropy has developed at a different pace. There have been, of course, a number of pioneering philanthropists, such as Sir Ian Potter, Helen Macpherson Smith, Walter and Eliza Hall, which was just previously mentioned, and Dame Elizabeth Murdoch. These philanthropists, amongst many others, have enhanced the lives of countless Australians. They've funded a myriad of causes, including breakthrough medical research, environmental conservation, animal welfare, homelessness, and accessible arts programs. And for decades, the only giving structure available to Australians were charitable trusts. And these antiquated structures discouraged most people from setting up their own philanthropic foundations during their lifetime. And this was due in part to the fact that charitable trusts are unable to provide donors with a tax deduction. So the advent of private ancillary funds, or PAFs, in 2000, developed under the then Prime Minister John Howard, and in consultation with the prominent business leader David Gonski, has had a significant effect on helping to drive philanthropy. And unlike charitable trusts, PAFs are tax-effective vehicles for managing the funds you wish to distribute to causes and organisations. They allow you to tax-effectively contribute money or assets to your own foundation purely to achieve philanthropic objectives. Founders of PAFs are able to manage and grow the foundation's assets and have a more strategic approach to their giving, as 5% of the net assets are required to be distributed to registered charities each year. And from my experience, PAFs are a brilliant way to engage the next generation. A common trait of next gens is that they're more socially and environmentally minded. So engaging them in philanthropic discussions, and even from a really young age, is an ideal way to support causes they care about, but also to foster their financial literacy and educate them of their responsibilities around wealth. With an estimated $2.6 trillion expected to pass between generations over the next 20 years, the importance of wealth preservation and opportunity to grow philanthropy is enormous. A study in the US found that 70% of wealth transfers fail, and that's where failure is defined as involuntary loss or control of the family assets. The study also uncovered that 60% of the failure was due to the breakdown of family communication and trust. A further 25% was attributed to the next generation not being adequately prepared. For wealth creators, these statistics are alarming. However, we know that the characteristics of successful wealth transfers often involves philanthropy within the family unit. Philanthropic foundations can bring families closer together and help to anchor the family around shared values. Martin Meyer, third generation of the Meyer family, who have had a significant contribution to society, is quoted as saying that philanthropy is one of the glues that keep the family together. So given the unprecedented wealth transfer that is occurring and the ongoing pressures placed on the for-purpose sector, the Australian government has announced an ambitious goal to double structured giving by 2030. And to aid this goal, the government has asked the Productivity Commission to analyse motivations for philanthropic giving and to identify opportunities to grow it further. The purpose of the inquiry is to understand trends in philanthropic giving in Australia, the underlying drivers of these trends, and to identify opportunities and obstacles to increase giving. And the final report is due out in May this year. The government's commitment to double philanthropic giving is encouraging and has been well received. And we can only hope that the recommendations in the final report will go far enough to incentivise more philanthropy and foster a greater culture of giving. Yet, irrespective of these findings, it's incumbent on all of us to identify how we can be more generous and inspire the next generation to engage in philanthropy. The future of our society and environment depends on it. Thank you very much.
obviously a well-educated speaker there who works to the timetable, etc. And I must admit, there's nothing like a stimulating conversation at home with the kids round the family table to say, now listen everyone, when I go, I'm going to give it all away. Now, we have a few minutes today. We've got Bob here and we'll take a few questions. So let's start the ball rolling. Come in.
Bruce Davidson, thanks very much. That was very interesting. A couple of things crossed my mind. One is that there are so many places now that you can donate money to. They're probably all tax deductible. You know the figures on this. How can we trust this? I mean, as members of Rotary, we're blessed. And as members of the Melbourne Rotary, we're really blessed because we know we can donate money and we know it'll be used effectively. But we don't know that when we make donations to other organisations. And I'll have a supplementary question. In Australia, where a lot of things are provided by the government, how do we know that the money we donate does not end up meaning that the government doesn't have the same commitment to that project?
Thank you very much. And you're right, there are 50,000 charities in Australia. And so it's really difficult to know, and you want to ensure that your contribution is going to have an impact. So what you're looking for, you need to do your due diligence on charities. First of all, when I work with clients, I sit down with them and I narrow down what are their interest areas, what do they value, has something in their life touched them and they want to give back to a particular cause. So you do that first step. And then the second step is the due diligence on charities. So what you're looking for is that, do they have good leadership? Are they outcomes focused? Do they have strong capability? And those overarching principles is what you're looking for. You don't want to necessarily be scrutinising the project that they're raising funds for. You want to be assessing the organisation as a whole. And that's why many clients come to Morgan Stanley and work with me, because they often say, you know, we have these philanthropic funds, we want to give back, we've worked hard to increase our wealth, but we want to make sure that we're actually going to have an impact. So looking at charities and organisations that are outcomes focused, not outputs focused. So I strongly believe working with a philanthropic advisor to do that due diligence is essential. And I guess in response to your second question with government and how philanthropy can work with government, I would never want philanthropy to be the funder to fill the gaps for government. Philanthropy should really be working with government. And what I've seen, the power of philanthropy is it can be more flexible. It doesn't have to fit into discrete boxes like government funding. It can take on more risks. So a project that I have previously worked on is looking at homelessness in the older population in Shepparton. And it's a pilot program that we ran, funded completely by a charitable foundation. And it was risky. It had never been done before. It was approaching and addressing homelessness in a very different and innovative way. Government would have never picked this up. But we've run this program, it's been successful, and now government are wanting to know how to support it. So it's not that government is filling any gaps, it's, I guess, taking on more risk and encouraging governments to follow the projects that they have supported.
Thank you very much, Clementine. Very interesting talk. I read somewhere that if the top 10 wealthiest people in the US were to give away their wealth, world poverty would be written off.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether that's exactly right, but it's the principle of the message that I'd love to be able to get across to the wealthiest people in Australia. Is there a way of doing that?
I think the work that Bill and Melinda Gates have been doing in the US around the Giving Pledge has been really powerful to encourage a lot of the wealthiest Americans to pledge that they will give away the majority of their wealth. And I guess with philanthropy, philanthropists can wield a lot of power because it's completely undemocratic. So we just need to make sure that if big philanthropy like in the US grows here in Australia, that there are checks and balances in place. But what I'm seeing is that a lot of younger entrepreneurs, like the founders of Atlassian and Canva, are extremely philanthropic. So I'm confident that the next generation of these tech founders, philanthropy will be embedded not only within their business, but personally as well.
May I say on behalf of everyone here today, what a wonderful talk. You've summarised all the things that we probably wanted to get answers to. I did have one there. I just wonder, with superannuation being capped at 3 million, does that mean people will put whatever extra they have over the 3 million into these philanthropic trusts or PAFs?
That's a really good point. So part of the Productivity Commission that I mentioned is the government is looking at ways to make it easier for individuals to donate via their super into charitable organisations, because at the moment it's not very tax effective. So we're hoping that in the final report there'll be recommendations to the government as how to make that easier for individuals.
Very good. Thank you. So a round of applause, please, for Clementine. Don't go away, don't go away. And on behalf of us, we have a specially minted 100-year coin that your children can fight over. And I think included in here, we have some socks that have been made by my I would say my charity, but we have a company called Wilderness Wear, and we do make very good socks.